When 16-year-old Deshaun helped a desperate stranger jumpstart his dying Harley behind a Phoenix truck stop at 2 a.m., he had no idea that one act of compassion would bring an army of leather-clad warriors to his concrete sanctuary the following sunrise. The homeless teenager thought he was just sharing what little knowledge his uncle had taught him about batteries and cables, but he couldn't have imagined he was about to discover that family isn't always connected by blood. Sometimes it's forged in the sacred exchange between two souls who understand what it means to be abandoned by everyone who was supposed to care. What unfolds when America's most feared brotherhood decides that a debt of honor must be paid to a kid who society threw away like yesterday's garbage? The truck stop sits like a neon island in the Arizona desert darkness, its fluorescent tubes humming their electric lullaby, while semis idle in diagonal rows like sleeping metal giants. Deshaun Washington presses himself into the narrow space between the dumpster and the cinder block wall, his thin body folded into angles that would make a contortionist wince, but this corner catches the warmth bleeding from the kitchen exhaust vent and keeps the security guard's spotlight from finding him during the midnight rounds. His uncle's old Army surplus jacket hangs on his frame like a tent on a sapling, the desert camouflage pattern faded to ghost colors from too many washings in gas station bathrooms and streams that run under highway overpasses where Phoenix's forgotten children make their temporary homes. The purple backpack wedged under his head contains his entire universe, a library copy of The Autobiography of Malcolm X. That's 3 weeks overdue because he has no library to return it to, a pocket knife his uncle pressed into his palm before the cancer took him 2 Februaries ago, and 6 crumpled dollar bills that represent the difference between eating tomorrow and going another day with stomach acid burning holes in his insides. He watches the constant parade of travelers through half-closed eyes, their voices carrying across the parking lot with the casual confidence of people who know exactly where they'll sleep tonight and what address to write when someone asks where they're from. The world is full of people who belong somewhere, and then there's Deshaun, who belongs nowhere, whose mother chose crack over her only son when he was 12, and whose father is just a name on a birth certificate that might as well be written in invisible ink for all the good it's ever done him. The motorcycle announces itself with a sound like distant thunder, struggling to become lightning, its engine coughing and sputtering as it limps into the parking lot with the desperate determination of a wounded animal seeking shelter. The Harley is magnificent, even in its distress. A vintage fat boy with custom paint that catches the sodium lights like liquid fire, chrome pipes that should sing but instead wheeze with mechanical emphysema. The rider guides it to the far end of the lot away from the pumps, away from the bright lights and prying eyes, and when the engine finally surrenders with a sound like a death rattle, the man's shoulders sag with the weight of defeat that Deshaun recognizes in his own reflection every time he catches sight of himself in store windows. The smart play would be to stay hidden, to protect his secret sleeping spot, and avoid the complications that come from inserting yourself into other people's problems. Because kindness has cost him dearly before, gotten him robbed twice, beaten once, and left with a knife scar on his ribs from a guy he tried to help who turned out to be higher than the Arizona sky. But something about the way the biker removes his helmet with trembling hands, something about the way he bows his head like a man praying for a miracle he doesn't believe will come, pulls at the part of Deshaun's soul that his uncle used to say was too soft for this hard world. Before he can talk himself out of it, before the voice of survival can scream loud enough to be heard over the voice of compassion, he's standing up and walking across the parking lot with his heart hammering against his ribs like it knows he's making a dangerous choice. Battery's dead? The words emerge rougher than he intends, his throat scratchy from the desert dust and dehydration that's become his constant companion. The biker's head snaps up, and for a moment, Deshaun sees fear flicker across weathered features before it's replaced by something softer, something that looks almost like relief. The man's face is a roadmap of hard miles and harder choices, lines carved deep around eyes that have witnessed more sunrises from behind handlebars than from the safety of bedrooms. And when he speaks, his voice carries the gravel of 1,000 conversations held at highway rest stops with strangers who became brothers. Yeah, the biker says, and the single word contains volumes of frustration and desperation. Battery died about 20 miles back. Been coasting on hope and stubbornness, but I guess I finally ran out of both. He looks at Deshaun with the careful assessment of a man who's learned to read people quickly, in places where misreading someone can get you killed. You know bikes, kid? Deshaun shrugs with the practiced nonchalance of someone who's learned not to advertise what he knows because knowledge attracts the wrong kind of attention. My uncle used to work on them. Taught me some things before he died. The admission costs him something, bringing his uncle's memory into this moment, but he can almost hear the old man's voice saying, "When you got knowledge that can help somebody, Deshaun, you share it, because knowledge is the only wealth that multiplies when you give it away." The biker's name unfolds like a confession, Thomas Bear Morrison, and he tells his story with the raw honesty of a man who's got nothing left to lose and everything riding on getting somewhere fast. His son David is graduating from Arizona State tomorrow morning, the first Morrison to ever finish college, the first one to break the cycle of bikes and bars and the beautiful, dangerous freedom of the road. Haven't seen him in 3 years, Bear says, his voice cracking like old leather left too long in the sun. He told me not to come unless I was ready to be a real father, not just some ghost that shows up when it's convenient and disappears when things get hard. Tomorrow's my chance to prove I can show up, that I can be there when it matters. Deshaun listens while his hands move automatically, checking connections his uncle taught him to check, testing terminals with fingers that remember lessons learned in a garage that smelled like motor oil and old Milwaukee, and the particular kind of love that shows itself through teaching rather than telling. He understands what Bear isn't saying because he's lived the other side of that story. He is the son who waited for someone to show up and choose him, waited until waiting became its own kind of dying. Terminals are corroded, Deshaun murmurs, and the diagnosis carries the authority of knowledge earned rather than borrowed. You got any Coca-Cola? Bear blinks in confusion, but Deshaun is already moving, pulling out 3 precious dollar bills from his pocket and walking into the truck stop with the measured stride of someone who knows how to be invisible when necessary and present when required. He returns with a can of Coke, a packet of baking soda he talked the tired cashier into giving him for free, and wire brush attachment he found abandoned near the air compressor. Bear watches with growing wonder as this kid who looks like he hasn't slept in a proper bed in months pours Coca-Cola over battery terminals with the precision of a surgeon, the acid in the soda eating away at corrosion like magic turning back time. My uncle used to say that sometimes the solution to complicated problems is simple if you know where to look, Deshaun says quietly, his hands working with practiced confidence despite the cold desert night that makes his joints ache with the kind of pain that comes from sleeping on concrete too many nights in a row. The baking soda comes next, neutralizing remaining acid, and then the wire brush cleaning metal until it gleams like new under the parking lot lights. Bear hands him jumper cables without being asked, and Deshaun connects them to a trucker's idling Peterbilt with the ease of someone who's done this dance before, who understands that engines are just puzzles waiting for someone patient enough to solve them. The Harley roars back to life with a sound like resurrection, and Bear's face transforms from despair into something that might be faith in a universe that occasionally rewards persistence. He reaches for his wallet with shaking hands, pulling out bills with the desperate eagerness of a man trying to balance cosmic scales. Please, kid, let me pay you. You just saved my life. You just gave me back my son. Deshaun steps back into shadows that feel safer than the light, shaking his head with the dignity that poverty hasn't managed to steal from him yet. Just get to your son, he says, and the words taste like his uncle's wisdom on his tongue. Show up for him. That's worth more than whatever money you got in that wallet. He thinks about all the times he waited by windows for a mother who never came back, all the promises that evaporated like desert rain before it hits the ground, and he meets Bear's eyes with an intensity that makes the older man go still. Don't let him spend his life wondering if his father loved him enough to try. Bear stares at him like he's seeing something holy in the fluorescent glow of a truck stop parking lot, and when he finally speaks, his voice is thick with emotion that men like him usually drown in whiskey rather than express. What's your name, son? Deshaun Washington. Deshaun Washington, Bear repeats slowly, like he's memorizing scripture. I won't forget you. I swear to God, I won't forget this. Then he guns the engine and disappears into the desert darkness, leaving Deshaun alone with the echo of gratitude and the dangerous warmth of being seen as someone who matters, even if only for a moment, even if only to a stranger who will probably forget him by the time the sun rises. The dawn comes like a judgment over Phoenix, turning the sky colors that have no names in any language Deshaun knows, painting the truck stop and the highway and the endless desert in shades of promise and threat. He hasn't slept, too wired from the encounter to let his guard down, replaying the moment when Bear's face lit up with hope, like watching someone remember what joy feels like after years of forgetting. The morning shift arrives with their coffee and their complaints about traffic and their blessed certainty that tonight they'll sleep in beds that belong to them, and Deshaun is calculating whether he can afford to buy a breakfast burrito when he hears it. The sound starts as a vibration felt through the soles of his worn-out sneakers before it becomes something heard, a deep rumbling that grows and grows until it seems like the earth itself is announcing the arrival of something apocalyptic. They appear on the horizon like a mirage made solid, a column of motorcycles stretching back so far that the end disappears into the morning heat. Shimmer, chrome, and leather catching the sunrise like an army of angels wearing the colors of the damned. Deshaun's blood turns to desert ice as he recognizes the patches, the distinctive insignia that marks these riders as members of the most notorious motorcycle club in America, Hell's Angels, rolling into the truck stop with military precision that suggests purpose and power and the kind of attention that homeless black kids learn early to avoid at all costs. His survival instincts scream at him to run, to disappear into the Arizona landscape like he's done 100 times before when authority or danger came looking. But his legs won't cooperate, his feet welded to concrete by a terror so complete it paralyzes every muscle. The convoy pulls into the truck stop with choreographed precision, surrounding him not with threat but with something that looks impossibly like protection, their bikes forming a perimeter that cuts him off from the rest of the world. At the center of this magnificent procession rides Bear, but not the desperate man from last night. This Bear wears his colors with pride that radiates like heat from pavement, his leather cut displaying patches that speak of decades of loyalty, leadership earned through fire and blood, respect that cannot be bought or faked. He removes his helmet with ceremonial gravity, his weathered face breaking into a smile that transforms his entire being from intimidating to something that terrifyingly resembles family. Brothers and sisters, Bear's voice carries across the parking lot with the kind of authority that makes even hardened bikers stand straighter. I want you to meet Deshaun Washington. This young man made sure I didn't miss the most important day of my son's life. He gave me back my family when he had every reason to look the other way and protect himself first. The words hang in the desert air like a revelation, and suddenly Deshaun understands that he's not surrounded by danger, but by something far more frightening. Gratitude, backed by the collective power of people who live by codes more ancient and absolute than any law written in courtrooms. The transformation happens like watching time-lapse photography of flowers blooming in the desert after rain, as these leather-clad giants who look like they could break him in half instead treat him like something precious. Weathered hands reach out not to take but to give, pressing money into his palms despite his stammered protests, offering food from their saddlebags with the gentle insistence of people who recognize hunger because they've lived it themselves. A woman with silver hair braided down her back and eyes that have witnessed things that would break lesser souls presses a wrapped breakfast sandwich into his hands with a smile that reminds him of the grandmother he never met but always wished for. "Eat, baby," she says softly. "You look like you've been running on empty too long." A man with a scar bisecting his eyebrow and the build of someone who could bench press a Buick offers him a leather jacket with patches that speak of brotherhood and belonging. "Getting cold at night," he says gruffly. "Can't have you freezing out here." Their voices, rough from years of highway wind and bar fights and the beautiful dangerous freedom of the road, call out thanks and respect in tones that sound foreign to ears, accustomed to suspicion, avoidance, and the particular cruelty that society reserves for Young black men with nowhere to go and no one to claim them. Deshaun feels something crack open inside his chest, some frozen place where he stored all the hurt of being unwanted, and dangerous warmth floods in. The terrifying possibility of belonging somewhere, of mattering to someone, of being seen as worthy of protection rather than suspicion. Bear approaches with the measured stride of a man performing a sacred ritual, and when he pulls Deshaun into an embrace that smells of leather and motor oil, and something indefinably paternal, the teenager's carefully constructed walls crumble like sandcastles before a flash flood. "My boy graduated summa cum laude," Bear whispers, his voice thick with emotion. And when I asked him what he wanted for a graduation gift, you know what he said? He said he wanted to meet the angel who made sure his dad showed up. So we're here, all of us, to say thank you and to make sure you know that you're not alone anymore. The embrace lasts longer than any physical contact Deshaun has experienced since his uncle died, long enough for him to remember what it felt like to be held by someone who chose to care, long enough for tears he's been holding back for years to finally escape and soak into Bear's leather vest. They don't just give him money, though there's more cash in his pockets now than he's seen since his uncle's funeral, when well-meaning people pressed bills into his 12-year-old hands before disappearing back into their comfortable lives. They give him something infinitely more valuable. Bear reaches into his vest and pulls out a business card worn soft from being carried close to his heart, and he explains that his son David is starting a non-profit automotive training program for at-risk youth in Phoenix, teaching kids who society has written off how to rebuild engines, and by extension, how to rebuild themselves. "David specifically asked me to find you," Bear says, his eyes holding the kind of certainty that comes from recognizing kindred spirits across the vast divide of circumstance. "He wants you to be his first student, and honestly, I do too. You've got the gift, Deshaun. You've got the hands and the heart. Let us help you put them to good use." The card trembles in Deshaun's fingers like a leaf in a storm, and on the back, Bear has written an address in careful script along with instructions. "Program starts Monday. Room and board included. You've got family now, nephew. Come home." A massive biker with a gray beard that reaches his chest steps forward, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "We take care of our own kid, and as of right now, you're one of ours. You need anything at all, you call that number. We got chapters in every state, and every single one of them will have your back." The sun climbs higher over Phoenix as the motorcycles begin to depart, their engines creating a symphony that sounds less like machinery and more like promise, like possibility, like the universe occasionally remembering to reward kindness with kindness. But before they leave, each biker stops by Deshaun, some offering gruff words of encouragement, others pressing more money or food into his hands, a few simply gripping his shoulder with the kind of touch that says, "You matter. You're seen. You're worthy of protection." Bear is the last to leave, and he hugs Deshaun one more time with an intensity that speaks of all the sons he failed and this one chance at redemption. "Monday morning," he says firmly. "You be at that address. My son's waiting for you. Your family's waiting for you. Don't make us come looking for you, because we will, and we'll drag you back to where you belong if we have to." Deshaun watches the last motorcycle disappear into the desert heat shimmer, and he stands in the sudden quiet with a job offer in his pocket, more money than he's ever possessed, a leather jacket that actually fits, and most importantly, a phone number that connects him to people who've decided he's worth protecting. The truck stop returns to its ordinary rhythm of travelers and 18-wheelers, but nothing will ever be ordinary again. He pulls out his uncle's photo from his wallet, the edges worn soft from being touched too many times, and he holds it next to Bear's business card like he's introducing two people he loves. "I think you'd like him, Uncle Ray," he whispers to the desert wind. "I think he reminds me of you, the way he sees people, the way he believes in second chances." And as he shoulders his purple backpack with the weight of hope instead of despair, ready to begin the journey toward the first real home he's had since love learned to speak his name, he allows himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the universe hasn't forgotten about kids like him after all. The Arizona sun blazes overhead like a blessing, casting long shadows on pavement where oil stains tell stories of travelers helped and journeys continued. And Deshaun Washington walks toward Monday morning with the certain knowledge that sometimes family finds you in the most unexpected places, brought by the roar of engines and the fierce loyalty of people who understand that honor isn't about where you come from. It's about what you do when someone needs help, and you're the only one standing close enough to provide it. 2